I absolutely got up at 5 in the morning on Tuesday, a day I was supposed to be performing a concert that evening with my dear friend Reggie Harris, who's an African-American folk singer and song leader and activist, who I got to spend 3 months or 3 weeks in January out in Massachusetts, Maine, and New York, watching him talk to second and third graders and inspiring them to have courageous conversations about race. Now, I am so privileged in that I can do that. I've done that my whole life because I've also traveled the country and have a beautiful friendship with my friend, the Reverend Robert Jones, who some of you may know because he's from around here. And Robert and I have crossed the country talking about how we can either fight about what makes us different or we can celebrate our similarities. And people will sometimes go, is this one of those diversity tolerance programs? And I'd say, no. I tolerate back pain. I celebrate diversity. Because without it, just talking about music, without it, we would not have the kind of music we have in our country. It is the reason why we have rhythm and blues and rap and folk, and every kind of music comes from those intersections of different cultures coming together to share their music. That to me is worthy of celebration. I love Unitarians. I'm not officially a Unitarian, so let me just come clean with that. But I'm not much of a joiner in general, I gotta say. But if I joined any congregation, it would be the Unitarian Church. It's the one I do the most work with. And it's for this simple reason. I believe the Universalist Unitarian Church approaches the world with an open mind and an open heart. And you can't ask for much more than that, right? That is what it's all about. You are definitely the kind of congregation where you can come, as my friend David Roth would say, to have your answers questioned. Right? And I think that's healthy. I think that is how we learn from each other, to be willing and vulnerable enough to have our answers questioned. So with that in mind, I invite you to both listen from here, right? I'll stick around as long as we need to sort of talk through anything you might disagree with or need clarification about. I'll be around right through the vegan potluck dinner or lunch. Because I'm going to be saying some things that might be a little provocative. I'm not sure. All I know is they wouldn't leave me alone at 5 in the morning on Tuesday. So after 35 years of touring with the Reverend Robert Jones, more recently with Reggie Harris, I've come to this conclusion. And this is exactly what I woke up with that morning. I woke up with the title for this talk, which is this: Unicorns, Bigfoot, the Tooth Fairy, and Race. Go on. A white folk singer's thoughts during Black History Month. So in order to clarify what I mean by that kind of provocative statement, I need to first talk about the nature of language. And also what I mean by spirituality, because this is, after all, a church. And then a few ideas for action. So let's begin with a couple things about words. And again, if you can try to listen to understand first. And do you find sometimes that when you're in conversations with people, especially if they don't agree with you, that they don't tend to listen to what you're saying, they tend to listen to respond to what you're saying? And that's a really important distinction. We do it too. I'm saying they do it to me. I'm sure I do it to them as well. So what I'm asking you to do, if you can, is to try and listen to understand first, and we'll work out the details later. I don't believe any of this stuff. It's just the way I felt at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. I actually do believe some of it. I do believe this: words are arbitrary symbols and structures created by humans to categorize experience, communicate, and build meaning, right? That's what words are. What's important in that sentence is that they are symbols. They're not the thing. They're symbols for the thing. And they are made up 100% by human beings. Would you agree? They're tools to shape perception in order to generate a shared understanding. They're used to navigate and to organize our world. Because of that, we absolutely need them to function, obviously, right? We couldn't get along without words and language. But we also need to realize that there is a limitation to words and language. One of the teachers I love to read in the world of spirituality is J. Krishnamurti, who went around the world and gave talks about spirituality. And I'm going to paraphrase one of the things he said, which is that the minute we call something a tree, we no longer look at that tree for its uniqueness. It categorizes that tree into whatever every other tree looks like. And that can be to our own peril, right? Because can you really enjoy the uniqueness of a tree without lumping it in to that categorization? Now give you an example. If you were speeding 90 miles an hour down the freeway and you were about to hit a tree, I would say, stop, don't hit that tree. And its uniqueness wouldn't be of all that much consequence, right? So there's a reason why we do that, and there's a purpose for using that word in different ways. But when we generalize, we strip that thing of its uniqueness. So always look for the purpose behind the phrasing and the words we use. I wrote a little song. I've never done it a cappella, but I'll just sing a little bit up for you. The song goes like this. Do I have that song? Yeah, let me just try it a little a cappella. I wrote this one morning. There is no word for the coming of the dawn. It casts its spell with dew upon the lawn. Language fails and meaning is blurred for the dawn. There is no word. There is no word for the color of the sky. A paintbrush stroke the sun will amplify. To add your voice would be absurd for the sky. There is no word. But we talk of the way it makes us feel, and we think, but none of that is real. We might just find that our soul will be revealed when we learn to just be still. There is no word for the whisper of the wind. No need to ask where it's going, where it's been. It's just not like any song you've ever heard for the wind. There is no word. There is no word for the look that's in your eye, splashed with light and color from the sky, deep and dark like the shadow of a bird for your eyes. There is no word. But we talk of the way it makes us feel, and we think, but none of it is real. We just might find that our soul will be revealed when we learn to just be still. So, if language is what I just said it is, something we make up, a construct, let's talk about some words. Let's talk about, let's start with Bigfoot. No, let's start with unicorns. Do they exist? That's not an easy question. I mean, on one hand, we can say, yes, there is no beast in the wilderness that looks like a horse but has a horn on their head, right? There's no such animal, but does the concept exist? And if so, why? Why did we invent the unicorn? Because it's a beautiful thing of whimsy and fantasy that we can entice our children with stories, right? How about Bigfoot? Does Bigfoot exist? Some people think so, some people say no, but does the concept exist? Absolutely. And we can go back into history, because I also love to study folklore. thousands of years of stories that warn us about things, like going into the woods. It's one thing to say, don't go into the woods. It's another to say, or you might meet Bigfoot, right? What about the tooth fairy? What kind of a story is the tooth fairy? I'm glad there's no kids here. Well, I could also go back hundreds, even thousands of years to show you all the stories that we've invented to help us get through difficult times in our life. We could say to a kid, hey, don't worry about it. All your teeth are going to fall out and then they'll magically reappear. That's frightening. But if you have this invented thing called the tooth fairy, that's one way of getting us through these bizarre passages in life. So, unicorn, the Bigfoot, tooth fairy. Let me ask the big question. Does race exist? Well, I would say that race doesn't exist in the same way that the tooth fairy and Bigfoot and unicorns don't exist, right? If it does exist, let me just ask you a couple questions. Like that stink bug's just going to take a little trip there. Let me ask you a few questions about racism. And this, I got to tell you, this is something I first started to think about 3 years ago. I was privileged to have lunch on a monthly basis with 3 African-American heroes of mine, the Reverend Robert Jones, Reggie Harris, and the late Josh White Jr. So we would sit at diners and torture waitresses with laughter and our hilarity. And I asked Reggie the question about race, and he said, well, it's a construct. So is the tooth fairy, so is Bigfoot, and so is, what was the last one? Unicorns, right? So let me ask you a couple questions about race. Is it based on skin color? Is race based on where your people originated? Is it based on a belief or on religion? The way it exists, I would say yes to all those things. I've heard the phrase Asian race. Have you ever heard the phrase Australian race? Aren't those both continents? Why would one be a race and the other one not be a race? I've heard the term Muslim race. Have you ever heard Christian race? That's not one I've ever heard. Are Jews a separate race from Buddhists? Is there a Buddhist race? I've heard of the Hispanic or Latino race, but never the Northern European race. It is a construct. We made it up. But why? What was the purpose for making that up? What do we get out of it? Like we get from all those other things I mentioned. Every time we invent a new group of people and categorize them as a race, you can bet that that concept will be walking hand in hand with some form of oppression. Every time. That seems to be the purpose of why we invented it. Race doesn't exist in the same way that unicorns, Bigfoot, and the tooth fairy don't exist. They are all made up cultural ideas invented for different purposes. Racism, on the other hand, absolutely exists. So I think it's an important distinction. One of the reasons I walk so freely with my friends of different color as a white person in Black History Month is because I understand that race is a construct, but racism is a reality. Don't mistake this for the white guy who says, I don't see color. That's a slippery slope. By saying you don't see color, I think you're probably meaning that you're unwilling to acknowledge thousands of years of oppressive behavior towards folks who don't look like you. Systematic racism is real. When Robert and I are backstage, we were in Toledo a year ago, and the guy came back to explain to us all the different rules of the house, like, what we shouldn't do. And the entire thing, the entire speech was delivered to me, as if Robert didn't even exist. Now, I got to tell you, I didn't even notice. And when he left, Robert, who doesn't get angry very often, said, did you see what just happened? And I went, no, what happened? He said, it was like I wasn't even in the room. You start to notice this stuff, But you don't unless you are amongst folks who don't look like you, right? That's when you have the opportunity to see it in reality. I remember, like, at the end of a concert, they'll have a potluck, and they will put together all the food, and they'll make a plate, and they'll present it to Robert, assuming that he's probably the one that has the needy family. I wish they knew that Robert makes 5 times more money in music than I do. Because the truth is, that is well-intentioned, but it's also kind of a racism, isn't it? We were at a restaurant up north, doing a gig up north in Traverse City, and it was a crowded big boy restaurant, and Robert drives a Cadillac, right? And so there are 100 cars in the parking lot, and the waitress came right over to our table and said, "Sir, I think you left your trunk open on your car." It was the Cadillac. You know, the reason we don't understand this is because we can't understand this as white folks. We're like a fish in water, which means, to me, does a fish know that water even exists? I don't think so. It's just ingrained in us. And until little things start to open our eyes, until we start paying attention to those things, we could never see them. So I just got a couple more things I want to talk about. Racism is real, and we need to understand that. We can't be that guy that says, "I don't see color," because of course that will also lead you down an interesting path. I'm going to talk a little bit about spirituality. And again, I could only do this at a Unitarian Universalist church, because, you know, not everybody in religion is as open. Would you agree? So my understanding of spirituality runs in complete contrast to the world of classification and division. Spirituality is deeper than language. Those concepts, classification and division, are in the realm of science and intellect. And these are absolutely critical ways of looking at the world, and they allow us to develop things like, I don't know, technology and medicine, right? We could not survive without classification and discrimination on that level. But for me, spirituality starts with a very different premise. There is no division. There is no division. All living things are one with a force that can't be described by using words, deeper than words. I hesitate to even use the word force, because over and over again in the Bible, they keep talking about how God cannot be known, right? We have trouble accepting that, because we have trouble as humans accepting that there's something we can't know. You know, I'm perfectly comfortable with saying we can't know that. It's deeper than our knowing. But I can believe it. I can feel it in my connection when I sing a song and you join me in that song. We know it when we see it, and there are no words. There are no words for that. So I'm just going to quickly quote, and then I'll close up. One of my favorite teachers on the subject of spirituality. Here's another thing I've learned about studying spirituality. It doesn't matter which teacher you look at. They all say the same thing, and they've all said the same thing for thousands of years. There's very little difference in the true meaning of what they say. So I'm going to boil it down in the words of one of my favorite teachers, a guy by the name of Adyashanti, who just retired from teaching very recently. So he talks about 3 aspects of spirituality. Now hold on for this. First one is non-dual awareness, recognizing that there is no separation between oneself, others, or the divine. The essence of all is one. So that's one premise. Now the divine can have several different words, because words don't work. So we have words like God and love and truth and beauty and love. Did I say that one already? Part 2, divine humanity, experiencing the sacred within everyday existence. You don't need to escape the world. It's here. There's no path to it. unless the path points this way. Finally, the way of liberation. And I love what you said about Angela Davis, because this sort of goes along with that. The way of liberation is letting go of the ego's need for control. Accept reality and live with an open, unconditional awareness. Kind of goes back to what I admire about Universalist Unitarian Church. Committed to accepting reality and doing it with what I like to call a fierce and an open heart. A fierce and an open heart. If I wrote a book, it would be called this: Pay Attention, Tell the Truth. Those are two very complicated ideas. First of all, how do you pay attention? You were meditating this morning. I love it. Those are the paths to paying attention. Telling the truth is just simply accepting reality. And one of the things that every single one of these spiritual teachers would say is that the only reality is now. Right here, this moment, these words. And by the way, by the time you understand that, it's past, it's gone. I had a great spiritual teacher that I loved by the name of Mike Snyder. He was very common. He would ask people, "What now is it?" Because you can't answer what time is it, because by the time you do, that time is gone. So try that in your life this week. Ask somebody, "What now is it?" See what they say. All right, here's what I've got. I'm just going to boil this down quickly because I know we got to move on. And I'll sing one song to sort of end things. Here's kind of the way I walk in the world during Black History Month. And I got to tell you, I benefit as a white man from Black history more than any white man ought to, because I get to make music with Robert Jones and with Reggie Harris, and I get to be out there participating in these courageous conversations. And some of the things I keep in mind as a white guy in Black History Month is this. First of all, I can't possibly understand what it means or how it feels to be a person of color in America. I can't really know that. I can understand it intellectually, but I don't have centuries of inherited trauma like that. So I really can't. So when somebody says, "I just don't understand why black folks just can't get over it," right? And I'll say, why don't you just stop with, "I just can't understand," and don't say anything after that, because we really just can't understand. My brother said that to me about a year and a half ago, because he knows the work I do, and he's a lot more on the other side of the fence of where I am. And I said, "Well, Michael, you're a reasonable guy. So let me put it this way." I said, imagine that every single morning for our whole lives, from 1 to 18, we woke up and our dad slapped us in the face. Just every morning, we got a slap to the face. Now, when we turned 18, he stopped. Said he'd never do it again. Are you still going to flinch when he raises his arm? Is that still going to make you nervous when that hand goes up? Because you just don't erase hundreds of years of inherited trauma by saying it's over. Can you get that? I'm not sure he did. Number 2, racism is a problem I have to solve. It's not the responsibility of the victim. We invented it, right? It's our problem to solve, not theirs. And it's interesting because the number one question that I got on this 3-week tour with Reggie, after we were done singing mostly for white audiences, they'd look at Reggie and go, "Well, what can I do?" And Reggie is a very kind guy. I think there was maybe a difference between what he wanted to say and what he did say. I think what he wanted to say is, read a freaking book. There's only millions of words written about what you can do. Don't come to me. I've done the work. You do the work. But what did he say? "Oh, well, there's lots of things, But he got around to saying, do the work. Do the work. Oh, here's a good one. I'm learning that it's okay to be uncomfortable. When I encounter racism, I call it out. Did I mention it's okay to be uncomfortable? because that will surely create a potential uncomfortable situation. Racism is based on the fear of the unknown. Fear is based on the unknown. Put yourself in situations where you share space with people who don't look like you. I live in Farmington, Michigan, which is a very diverse population. A lot of folks moved in from Detroit and other places, but there is definitely a black movie theater, and there is definitely a couple of black diners, right? I understand self-preservation through self-segregation. I do. But that doesn't mean I can't have breakfast there, right? And I'm not going to go there to be intrusive. I'm just going to be in the habit of being in places where I am amongst people who don't look like me. I think that is a really good place to start. I went and saw the movie Hope. Is that the name of it? Or Nope? Remember that movie, Nope? There were 3 people in the Farmington Civic Theater, or in the theater, that mostly black theater. And when that movie was over, there was a woman, a black woman, and her maybe nephew or son maybe, and I, after the movie, I just went, "What'd you think?" And we sat there for 25 minutes and talked about this movie, which had all about to do race and stuff. I couldn't have done that at the all-white theater. And it was a lovely conversation. So I'm not saying miracles will happen right away, but I can tell you they won't happen at all if you don't mix yourself in with people who don't look like you. Because you know what, you guys? I looked up on AI, which is Google now, right? Everything's AI. And I asked it to define race. And they gave me 12 different categories of race. And do you know what all 12 of those categories had in common? Non-white. All 12 of them. Hawaiian, Asian, Hispanic, black, all non-white. What does that tell us? Right? What does that tell this fish swimming in water? Practice having a fierce and an open heart. That takes practice. A fierce and an open heart. My wife, Kim, who was here, reminded me to just say one other thing which has been said several times, and that is, love is an action word. Love is an action word.